my first intro to the USO was actually, I had an intro before the service, but one of the best experiences I had with the USO was in Gitmo, of all places. We had plenty of USO in Afghanistan and Iraq, North Africa, Japan. I mean, you name it, there was USO every time we deployed. And so, I mean, for the Marines, they could never be more thankful. But I'll tell one quick fun incident. We had Miss World and Miss Teen World and Miss USA come visit the guys. And then within 1 week later, they brought down the Eagles cheerleaders. And, you know, I'm trying to stay on the right side of this, but the guys couldn't have been more pleased. They were over the moon. And there was an old gunny who ran the USO down in Gitmo. And he made sure that before the cheerleaders had seen everybody else, they came out to the guys on the wire, because we were with FAST, it was with Fleet Anti-Terrorist Security Team. And so it was kind of their first introduction to troops. And I'm glad, you know, it wasn't like the week after when they're leaving, they're like, oh my gosh, get us away from these guys. So they were just brand new coming into Guantanamo, and their first tour ever on the USO, and the guys just couldn't have enjoyed it more. They were thrilled. They couldn't believe, you know, that there was an organization that was there to make sure that they had some fun. And since then, the respect has been, you know, all one way. I don't know that they know who Rip Rawlings is, but you know, every troop that I've ever encountered or been with or led or been led by is, you know, we've all made sure that we've had a chance to get the troops in front of the USO.
The USO has a special place in my heart. My first experience with them was in Vietnam. You know, the war was a bit controversial, to say the least. It didn't affect many of us who were there because we were doing our duty as we saw fit to do our duty. But we knew that there was some heat at home, and it did cause some uncertainty, some bad morale problems occasionally. And then, out of nowhere, somebody from the USO would show up. Sometimes a very pretty young lady, sometimes an actor doing a handshake tour. Sometimes, you know, the big guns, Bob Hope, would show up with his entourage. But the important thing to me was that they didn't carry any of that bad vibe with them. The USO, when they showed up to see us, was there because they loved us, and they cared about us, and they respected us, and we knew it.
I have nothing like the long service of the other two guys, and my time was entirely spent in CONUS, to my great disappointment. But even in CONUS, I saw them everywhere, and the support that they offered to guys who did need it, and that their service was invaluable. There's no other way to describe it. Let's just leave it at that.
Welcome to the Crew Reviews Independence Day Salute to the USO.
Today we are pleased to have authors Larry Bond, Dale Dye, and Rip Rawlings on the show.
And each of these men are both a veteran and an accomplished author in their own right. And we couldn't think of a better way for guests to celebrate our nation's independence and the USO. So, gentlemen, welcome. Good to see you all.
Here.
Welcome to the
Good
show.
be here.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Happy
guys.
to be
Gotta have a drink. Guys, if you could do me a favor, I'm going to ask you guys a question. We'll go through each person individually, but can you describe the moment in your military career or after your military career when you understood the value and the importance of the USO? And we start with you, Larry. I know you mentioned you were stationed here in the United States. You never actually went overseas, but was there a time where you like, oh my gosh, the USO is?
Well, yeah. I mean, okay. The only time when I had interacted with the USO, unfortunately, was while I was an officer aboard my ship. We were in Seattle, and we received unfortunate news about a loved one aboard aboard the vessel. And I was the guy who was detailed to fill him in because he was one of my guys. And then I immediately coordinated with the USO as far as emergency leave and stuff like that. So it was very, they were invaluable. There's no other way to describe it. I never had need to use their services myself. I was very lucky in that I was on a reserve destroyer that went up and down the West Coast. And so we were always close to home, so to speak. But for guys overseas, I can't imagine what it's like to be that far away from home and then get home, come to there. But I will mention my uncle, who was an Air Force colonel, light colonel, flew the Hope Tour around one year. Had a lot of stories about that. He flew C-130s, and so he was the guy. They always picked the best pilots they could to take the Hope Tour around.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have heard his stories about how they reacted to flying in a C-130, because it sure as hell ain't a 747.
Yeah, try sitting in the back of one of those things. Hey, Dale, what can you describe the moment when you knew and understood the value of the importance of the USO?
Yeah, the importance of the USO, I think, was always somewhere in the back of my military mind. Those of us who've worn the uniform and who've been around USOs, because you can't not be around them. They're everywhere you are. But I didn't really focus on how important they are to unit morale until I'd had a prefrontal lobotomy and became an officer. And then, lo and behold, as a young captain, they sent me to Beirut, Lebanon, 82 and 83.
Oh, it's a good time to be there.
Yeah, what a thrill. And the problem was the weather immediately turned to absolute crap. And none of us were Middle East veterans like today's soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines are. So we didn't know that the Middle East, we thought it was all going to be sand dunes and everything, but it was just crap weather. And morale was sinking, and we couldn't ever get anybody to really describe to us what the hell we were supposed to be doing there. They'd say, you're here to provide presents. How do you presents? I mean, that wasn't in the field manual anyway. So we couldn't quite figure this out, and I think we were kind of crying the collective Marine Corps poor ass over there, and wondering, does anybody care? And nobody cares about us, so we're sitting out here all by ourselves. And lo and behold, the USO shows up. And they had some great acts. I almost had to throttle 3 or 4 of my lance corporals because they brought on the LA Rams cheerleaders. And my guys were pole vaulting all the way up toward the
down, boy, down.
Yeah, whoa, but it was at that moment, sitting there and watching this USO show performance. And not just the performance, but their willingness to come out and shake hands and say hello and have that great home love light in their eyes. That's when it occurred to me, this is an outfit, this USO, whose collective heart, writ large, is certainly in the right place, and it's with us. And it was at that moment in Beirut, Lebanon, when I knew that this is an asset to all of us who serve in uniform.
Beautiful.
Rip, you're up. What do you think?
It's funny because I'm thinking while I'm listening to the other two gentlemen talk about it. And of course, Larry, you talk about being on a destroyer like it's nothing. And obviously for those of us who, Dale and I both were lustily in the sea service, a different version of it, but shipboard duty, sounds pretty cool. So don't sell yourself too short. I think a reserve destroyer actually sounds pretty neat. Well, it's funny because I've had a million experiences with the USO, and all of them positive. I've never had a negative, experience with either the services that they provided to my troops or to me. I'll tell you 2 kind of quick humorous stories, and then I'll kind of round it out with something a little sobering. But I'll never forget I was with Second FAST, Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team, and we were directed. My boss directed me up to Bahrain to go do some stuff. We were in North Africa doing some things. I think I'm not at liberty to talk about.
Just doing stuff.
Yeah, I think we've got a 20 or 25 years. I can't remember what it, but he sent me up north and he said, go up there right away. And I took the General's C5, or no, I'm sorry, C-17, the little tiny thing. And they used to do this, taking off from Africa, they had to stay below 200 feet and go directly out over the water and immediately do a turn, because the shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missile threat was real in North Africa. So anyways, I'm puking in a bag, and we get up, and we had to stop in Al Udeid. I spend the night on a wood floor. I found a piece of plastic that I laid down to sleep on, and some Jordanian troops came through at 2 a.m. and started smoking and watching Maury Povich on the one TV for and they put the volume up to like 500, and I'm like, this is just ridiculous. I'm like, this is terrible. Not only is it no sleep, but I've got black lung, and at this point, I can't find my brain. So I finally land up in Bahrain, and I get off, and I had to immediately go get my return flight scheduled so that I could get everything ready. And I get in this line, there's one guy ahead of me, and it looks like the flight terminal, and guys start stacking up behind me at the rapid rate. And I'm like, God, what am I? Everyone's flying somewhere, I guess, but at least I got here early enough, before the terminal opened. So finally, there's like, I don't know, 50 or 60 guys behind me. I'm like, holy cow, what's the deal? And then a guy walks up and says, hey, are you in line for the Blink 182 tickets? And I realized I was in the wrong line. The flight line was like 3 over. They were already down. Now there's like 10 guys in it, and I'm like, oh, damn it. So without missing a beat, because the line I was in that the USO had set up for Blink 182 was even longer. And I was number 2 man now for Blink 182. And so I looked at the guy and I go, yeah, I'm here for the tickets. And I'm like, at this point, I'll figure out my flight later. I'm going to Blink 182, damn it. I'm like, I deserve it. So well, the funniest thing was the first 50 guys in line got to get photos and autographs from these guys. And I'll be honest, I don't know a Blink from a 182, so I didn't know who these guys were really. Yeah. I just knew it was a rock band that all the kids loved. And I knew my Marines would be like, you got to see Blink 182. So I got a signature, or the only thing I had with me was a classified briefing, and it had the TS cover on it. So I tore the TS cover sheet off of it, because that's obviously not classified. And I gave it to the drummer, and he signed it. And I went into to follow up the story, I went into the meeting afterwards, and the young Marine is like, sir, and I'm like, I need to keep this cover because it's got all the signatures from these guys on it. He goes, sir, you can't keep that. It's classified. I go, no, the cover sheet is not. It just says enclosed class. Well, the kid goes, sir, I can't let you take that. You have to leave it. I'm like, oh, God. And, I didn't realize until later, and Dale would tell me I'm an idiot for not realizing it. That young sergeant just wanted all of the
Sure he did.
Yeah.
That's a great story. Hey, by the way, when was this? Rip, when was this? I want to FOIA this.
This was, this would have been, this would have been 2006.
That's awesome.
2006. Yeah. Well, the sobering USO story that I had, or I should just say it was just very touching, was we had a very difficult Iraq deployment in 2005. And we were coming back home, and long story short, we weren't bringing everybody home. And we landed in Maine, was our first U.S. point of entry. And, the guys were smoked, and no one wanted to talk to anybody. Everyone was just exhausted, and, still think our minds were still back in Iraq, put it that way. And the USO had organized for moms and dads of Maine. I mean, there weren't any of our moms and dads, but they lined the terminal as we transferred from one C-130 or whatever we're on, C-5 Galaxy, over to the other aircraft to get us back to home station. And they're all clapped. There were American flags everywhere. They had sodas, and I mean, they snuck a bunch of beers in to hand to the young guys. And you know, I think I was second in command at that time, and I didn't stop any of it. I'm like, yeah.
No.
They deserve you got any whiskey in there? I mean, they were kind of trepidatiously handing the kids some beers, and I was like, yeah, they more than deserve it. So, but that, I mean, I don't know that there was a dry eye in the audience. These were America's moms and dads welcoming home America's kids. They didn't care. They weren't their own kids, and that was all done by the USO, and I'll never forget it. Never forget it.
That is amazing.
Well, as we are commemorating Independence Day with this podcast, everybody who served has either an multiple extremely meaningful experiences and maybe extremely humorous experiences. And I don't care which one you choose, but I want to hear a humorous story or a meaningful story that pretty much, you know, sums up the themes we're thinking about when we think about the independence of this country. So I will start with you, Dale.
Well, of course you will.
On the spot.
That's right. Pick on the actor. That's what you do. Yeah, I got it.
And action. Go.
Thank you. What I remember, what I recall causing a swelling in my heart on the 4th of July was in 1968. We had just come through in Vietnam. We'd come through a very costly and turbulent Tet Offensive earlier in the year. And I was up on the demilitarized zone and one of the two pieces of high ground that look over into North Vietnam. I was at Con Thien. There was Zhou Lin. And you were looking at the enemy, and he was looking at you. And I didn't realize at the time that it was the 4th of July. I just knew it was some month, and I'm still in this country. And the gunny came by each position, and we were bunker rats. We had to stay in the bunker because they were hitting us with 200-300 rounds of incoming a day. So you spent most of your time in a bunker, and the gunny said, "Well, that crap is over as of today, gents." You know how gunnies do it. "That crap is over as of today, gents. It's the 4th of July, the birthday of our country. So get your ass out of them bunkers and watch this." And they ordered what we used to call FPF, or the Final Protective Fire, all along the line. Everybody from, you know, the CO's 1911 45 pistol to the 106 Ontos and the mortars and everything else just opened up. And the gunny's standing there next to me, and I can't hear a damn thing. This is just chaos, you know. And I looked at the gunny and I said, "Gunny, this is really cool, and it beats any fireworks show I've ever seen in my life. But has it ever occurred to you that maybe them little bastards over there might decide to fire back?" And of course, shortly after we ceasefire, they did, and we spent the rest of our 4th of July in bunkers. But what I'll remember is the spirit of the kids triggering. They were busting caps. They were putting lead downrange, and they didn't give a damn where it landed. They were celebrating their nation and celebrating independence. And in the situation that we were in Vietnam, that was so inspirational to me. It comes back to me often, and is another reason I'm deaf as a post. But at any rate, there you have it.
Hey, Rip, you're up.
Oh man, I tell you, I've had so many stories. I got to neck it down to one. I'll try to be short because the last one I don't think I was as succinct as I could be. But
You don't need to be.
No, go verbose.
Go for broke.
Yeah.
We're drinking, and one of the older guys is going to fall asleep here soon. So I don't know if we can do that.
Yeah, watch it.
Who, me?
All I've got is my youth and my inexperience.
Yeah. Carry on, Colonel.
There we go. They've got such great bona fides, so I got to catch up. Well, it's funny because I've had so many Independence Days and Christmases and Thanksgivings and Marine Corps birthdays downrange that in some cases they meshed together. But I remember in Iraq we were between Fallujah and Ramadi, and that was a hell of a place. It was interesting because I had read all about it as a kid. That area is where Roald Dahl, the famous author who wrote Charlie the Chocolate Factory, but also wrote some very kind of gripping adult fiction. If you've ever read Boy, or he wrote Solo about his experiences in World War II, and he was stationed in that area, that really nasty between area between Fallujah and Ramadi. And so we were literally in his barracks. We were staying in the steel barracks with industrial steel posts that he had built. So anyways, the 4th of July was creeping up on us, and we had these stockpiles of green star clusters, red star clusters, white star clusters, white smoke clusters, everything you could imagine. And they had one purpose, which was we used them to let the Iraqi citizens know that they had entered a zone they weren't supposed to, and the next thing that was coming was going to be a bullet through their windshield. And we had a lot of escalations of force, but the first part of that was try to flag them down, and then the second part was hit them with one of these clusters, and we usually ricocheted off the hood. And these things came out at a hell of a velocity. They would usually shatter a windshield, but we had a bunch of them. Now a memo went around from maybe my favorite, he's my favorite general ever, General Nicholson, General Larry Nicholson. He is a gunfighter like you've never seen before. And an order came out from his shop, from his command, that said, don't shoot these things off in celebration of the 4th of July. And I'm asking fellow company commanders, I'm like, hey, we're commiserating over, hey, what are you doing on that part of your battlefield? And hey, you got a mortar team that's working you over. Do you need my mortarmen to move over and help you out for a little while to do counter battery? And then the last thing is kind of, hey man, what do you think of that no clusters order? And inevitably you get the party line from your fellow company. Oh no, man, we're not going to, we need that. But you read the general's orders. We're not going to do it. We're like, all right, man. Yeah, me too. I would never touch this stuff. That stuff's for important things only. But, so the gunny and the platoon commanders on the morning of the 4th are like, hey, sir, what's the order on these? Are we allowed to bust a couple of them up and make some stuff happen? And I go, you know what? All I know is we got a lot of stuff happening in the battle space. And if you got to escalate force up to where you're popping these off, you don't need to ask me. You do what you got to do. So lo and behold, and I said, the biggest thing is don't call in and ask permission. Just,
just do it.
Yeah. So I'll never forget, it started off small where it's starting to get dark, and over one of my positions, there goes a green star cluster. And then, on the farthest post, obviously the guys have been watching who's going to break the radio silence for, who's going to break this order first. And so then there goes a green star cluster. And then there comes a yellow star cluster. And the funniest thing was, by the time, 9 o'clock rolled around and you actually had full darkness, I think we were bingo. We're Winchester on all ammo, but the night was just alive with these clusters going off all over the place. And it wasn't only at that point, every other company in the battle space is like, if Rip's guys are doing it, damn, I'm shooting these things off, goddammit, because they'll blame it on me first, right? So my guys literally went through every one that they had. Now here's the other funny part. The other funny part was the Iraqi insurgents had stockpiles that they used to communicate of Russian green star clusters and red star clusters. And you could tell which ones were theirs and which ones were ours. Ours kind of went up and then blew up in a plume like this. The Russian kind went up and then blew but fell downwards. And all of a sudden, I think, obviously we didn't communicate with the Iraqi insurgents at all, but I think the insurgents thought, oh my God, these guys are up to some shit. Lunch a couple of hours and let's try to confuse. We don't want them sneaking up on it. So all of a sudden we see these Russian clusters come up like, yeah, even the Iraqis love American independence.
USA.
Little did they know, yeah, they were chanting.
So I don't know. I've had many an Independence Day downrange. It's still very powerful to me. It always has been since I was a little kid, and I'm trying to make it the same for my kids, which is get them out to see fireworks and parades and understand the spirit of our nation. But yeah, I mean, as the other guys mentioned, those 4th of July's downrange are pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So Larry, in uniform or without, you have a memorable 4th of July story.
Well, my favorite 4th of July was when we were down in San Diego, and I got to go. Normally, I'd wear my civvies out on the beach, but I wore my whites because SeaWorld was having a free if you're in uniform day, and I just had the time of my life over there. Big fireworks show and everything else. In terms of, I was in the service from 1975 through 1982 when we weren't really shooting at anybody. So I don't have a lot of downrange stories to share. My story about American Spirit, though, has to do with one of our engine men on my ship. His name is not important, but he was a Tennessee Hill boy, and thick Southern drawl on the guy. Good worker. Get in trouble now and then, and have to go out and talk him back and stuff. And finally, I guess he just got tired of service life and left. And the NAIS wouldn't have a thing to do with him because he just went up in those hills, and they weren't going to go looking for him. So this was in I think he went AWOL or UA in '78, and come the Iranian hostage crisis. And when I was aboard ship, and we didn't do a lot when the crisis broke. Of course, we're watching the news like everybody else, and all of a sudden he shows up at the brow, going, "When do we leave?" Yeah, we're like,
MPs?
Go where? He says, "Are we going to go over there and kick their ass?" And I said, "Not really." I got to talk for a little while because at that point I was the legal officer, and so I had to write up the papers for him. And I says, "No, I'm sorry, you're going to a different place for a while." That's my story about Spirit. This kid was quite willing to screw around with the peacetime Navy, but when the bad guy showed up on the horizon, he was going to do his bit.
Nice.
He was surprised we weren't.
True.
Oh, it's great. For all of us and many other people, the USO is often thought of as Bob Hope and the other celebrities that come in and entertain the kids for a few hours and kind of bring a bit of that, to where they're stationed at, and kind of let them kind of forget about things for a minute. But the USO is way more than just shows. And so for the three of you, what's a service or feature of the USO that you're aware of and know that a lot of civilians may not even be aware of? And maybe Rip, maybe you can start us off on that.
And unlike all the other statements I've had, I'll be really brief on this one. It's the airport stuff, where you can go in and hang out at the USO. And, Larry can get in there with his 5 years in the service. Dale, with his 23, 22, 21 years. Yeah, 21 years. It doesn't matter. If you served 1 year and got out, they'll take care of you because they respect, even that Lance Corporal that may have had a little trouble and moved on. But that to me has always been impressive is most civilians have no idea, almost every major airport in the U.S. And there's a little kind of bonding camaraderie thing that goes on. You go in there and there's some Navy kid who's 18 years old who's on his way to get, see his wife give birth to their firstborn. He's fresh off that, carrier from the Gulf, and this is his way station through Chicago. some dumb chucklehead Marine major or captain or colonel or whoever you are, you sit down with the kid and you say, "Hey man, where you headed?" He tells you, the next thing you know, you're chatting, and it's wonderful. There he's getting some chow, he's getting something to drink, he's getting some internet. I think that's a wonderful service, and I was telling my wife the other day, I will contribute to the USO before I contribute to my fraternity and my 2 alma maters, and have contributed almost annually to the USO.
Yeah. Larry, do you have any thoughts on that?
As I mentioned earlier, my experience with the USO was I saw those airport kiosks everywhere I traveled, and it was like a backstop, which fortunately I didn't need. We had a sailor on our ship who did need their services or their coordination, basically, for emergency travel. And I mean, it was those were the guys that I called after I'd filled him in. I says, I will get a hold of the right people for you, and we will get you where you need to be as quickly as possible. So that is, I think, something that most civilians certainly don't know about, is their ability to assist with travel, and especially when sailors are really feeling a terrible loss.
Right. What do you say, Captain? What do you have in mind there?
Well, the airport stuff that Rip was talking about and that Larry were talking about, those things are very important. And Lord knows here in LA, we've got a huge USO at Los Angeles International. But what I remember in terms of a service that they provided, there were several USO facilities in Vietnam. I was closest to the one in Da Nang, which is sort of in the northern part of South Vietnam, or what used to be South Vietnam. And every once in a while, you could get back there to the rear. And the first place you headed for was the USO. And what I remember was that they had this, one of the ladies who worked there, God bless her, had set up a paperback book exchange. And so you could bring a book in and take one. So it's bring one, take one, or even if you couldn't bring one, they knew they'd let you have one. And I would go in and paw through all these books, because I'm an avid reader, always have been. And, what I expected to see was all of the Louis L'Amour and, the genre detective and bodice rippers and so on and so forth. And they were all there, but everybody got those, all the kids took those. So what was left was some really great novels, some stuff by Herman Wouk and Kurt Vonnegut and Michener. And this lady noticed that I wanted those books, not the other ones, not the ones that were most popular. And she asked me why, and I said, well, I'm an avid reader, and I just love a great story well told. And she said, well, who are you? And I gave her my name and said I was with the 1st Marine Division, 5th Marines up north. And she said, well, you just come see me anytime. She said, I'm going to put, when these kind of books come in, these really great novels come in, I'm going to put them aside with your name on them. And I promptly took 2 or 3 books and disappeared and forgot about it until about 2-3 months later, when my unit shifted positions and we went to a place called Anhua, southwest of Da Nang. And I managed to stop by that USO, and there she was, and she saw me coming through the door, and she held up a couple of these great novels for me. And my heart just swelled. And those are the little things that the USO does for us and brings to us. And that, believe me when I tell you, all of us who've served know how much downtime there is, and there's only so much nose picking and ass grabbing you could do. And so you need something to read. and there it was. And she just was so sweet, and her memory, she remembered everything. And that, folks, is the little kind of thing that the USO does that makes them so desperately important to those of us who serve.
I think that's actually their official motto. There's only so much nose picking and ass
Nose-picking?
grabbing.
Well, if it isn't, it ought to be.
I was gonna start the next question going nose picking aside.
Can I redo my whole answer because Dale's was so classy? I need to redo mine.
No, that's the power of him going last.
I know, man. Dale and Larry are both class acts. It's tough to follow those gentlemen.
All right, gentlemen. You've all served in you all served in uniform before turning in your guns, at least the government issued ones for the pen. And now you're entertaining those in uniform.
No, sorry.
No, what?
The one behind you.
Yeah, you got an RPG. That's I don't know. I don't know if Virginia allows you to have that RPG. But anyway, now you're entertaining those in uniform and out. So whatever your reasons for taking the path, you are now indirectly sharing part of the USO mission. So let's talk for a minute about your careers. Larry, an author is lucky if they have one successful series, but you have several. as well as 5 standalone novels and some nonfiction books. How did your time in uniform lay the foundation for your career as a novelist?
I can't imagine trying to do this without having served in the military. I grew up in Minnesota, very, I won't say it was a sheltered childhood, but certainly my experiences were filled with Minnesotans, which are not bad people, but certainly not the only kind of people. And getting on a ship, sailing around with a bunch of guys from all over. As soon as you hear a Bronx mouth or a Tennessee drawl, you start saying, yeah, there's other kinds of people out there. And seeing them and working and serving with them was absolutely vital. Not, what I learned about my particular job. I was ASW officer for a while, and then I was electronic warfare officer for a while. And those specific skills haven't been that important. But military life, other military members, that gets poured into everything I've done. Plus, I've learned to go back to the military. I mean, when Tom and I did Red Storm Rising, we went out and interviewed a bunch of people who were all very happy to share their experiences with us within the limits of classification, of course. And I go out to other communities when we need specific information or when we just want to find out. The only time we've had problems getting a hold of source material, shall we say, from the military was when I wanted to write a book about Delta Force. And they actually have a public affairs officer. I haven't quite figured out why. and I talked to the gentleman on the phone, and I said, look, I don't want techniques. I don't want tactics. I just want to get some basic information down. Like, do I have the guy's rank right? He says, right there, you're wrong. We want you to get it wrong, so when the bad guys read your book, which we hope they will, they get the wrong impression. So, we are a black box, and nobody knows anything about what goes on inside. I have possibly met Delta guys since then. They're very reticent about what they do, but again, it's a mysterious thing. We just made it a little bit more mysterious in the books we wrote. When you don't know the answer, you just ride around it. But yes, it's absolutely vital.
Right. And so what's next for you? Any new games on the horizon, maybe?
Any games on the horizon. So we are finishing a 1.5-year effort to get the 5th edition of Harpoon out the door. To talk about a game that was first appeared in April of 1980, and people are still looking for it. Minor brag, Board Game Geek. Well, I'm sure you guys all check on a daily basis. It's a website that tracks and reports on new games. Says that Harpoon is the most anticipated war game of 2020. Unfortunately, it's been the most anticipated game for a lot longer than we'd like, and we're very happy that we're going to get it out the door in just a few days with massive updates on U.S. and Russian stuff, and of course, new rules that cover ballistic missiles, UAVs, cyber warfare, all kinds of technology that simply didn't exist when the 4th edition was published 20 years ago.
Right. So it's all updated. So Larry, where can people go to find that?
It's going to be at the War Game Vault, and they can either get it as a downloadable PDF, which is delivered to them instantly, which is gratification is the American way, or they can order a softcover booklet, which comes in the mail a week later. Yeah.
There you go.
Print on demand.
Beautiful.
Well, I can think of no better way to celebrate American independence than kicking the Russians' ass in a board game. So.
Yeah. Bring your lunch, but it can be done.
Do it.
So Dale, our buddy Shake Davis returned in May in your latest novel, Delta File. Can you give our audience a summary of what Shake is up to this time around?
Yeah, Shake takes a very interesting walk down memory lane. He goes back to visit his old childhood haunts and re-examines a lot about his life and times. And along the way, runs into a very nefarious ring that is actually harvesting organs for sale. So, you know, I've got to stay away from the whiskey when I write these things.
Don't come after my liver.
But I think that the Shake Davis books have been really, really well received, in particular by the military audiences, and that leads me to kind of bloviate a bit on what you originally asked, which is, what does your military experience and your time in uniform have to do with what you did post active duty? And in my case, it was books, writing books, and motion pictures and television. And I couldn't conceivably write what I write, or either for screen or in books, without being able to call on that long 2 decades of experience and knowing the great colorful characters that I knew. And I think that's the important thing. And I look around for people who write books or who make movies, and believe me, there's very few of those who have had that military experience, because I will see in those books or in those films or in those television shows things I know, and to the extent that I can. I have a very simple agenda. Rip and I talked about this over beers when I was up visiting him. I have a very simple agenda, and that is to do whatever I conceivably can, drawing on those 2 decades of experience, to shine some much deserved and long overdue light on the men and women who wear our uniforms, whether it's in peacetime or in wartime. I think in large measure, and this is something that motivates me continually, I think in large measure, our American military men and women have been not served well in the popular media. And so my drill is to try to get them served well by writing about them, by making motion pictures and television shows about them, because I think they rate it. And I think because we no longer have a draft or compulsory service of any kind, so many Americans really don't get us. They don't know how we think, how we talk, how we feel. And I think it's important that they do, because we do it for them. After all, we serve this nation and the people of this nation. And so I think it's very important that we understand through whatever medium is available, or we help them to understand through whatever medium is available, who those young men and women are who so selflessly have volunteered to lay it all on the line if necessary.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
As for a drink.
Cheers.
Well, that's a pretty good segue into my follow-up as far as bringing attention to those who don't always get it. You have a television project that you're working on, and can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I have a mini-series. Think Band of Brothers or the Pacific. But this time it's about one company of Marines in the Korean War. And it's called The Forgotten War, appropriately, I guess.
Right.
But it's 10 episodes, and it follows this one Marine company from Spool Up Alert in late June of 1950, where they're starting to get kids coming in with suitcases, and they haven't even been to boot camp yet. They're just out of a reserve unit, and for the first time, Marine line companies, rifle companies, are accepting black Marines. So there's that element of that color barrier going down. So I'm hoping that I can get it placed. Showbiz is in a complete stasis right now.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going to happen. That and I have a new World War II movie, which is called No Better Place to Die, which is an 82nd Airborne D-Day story about a crucial fight at a bridge at a place called La Fière, which is near Saint-Mary-Glaise. It was a 3-day fight and crucial to the success of D-Day. And so I want to get that made. I'm lucky that Tom Hanks is executive producing that one. And speaking of Tom Hanks, he and I have a new movie coming out, which will be on Apple Plus TV or Disney Plus, I'm not sure, in July, which is called Greyhound. And it's a story of a destroyer. Larry, you'll be interested in it. It's a Fletcher-class destroyer.
Are you kidding? I've been tracking this since the first announcements came out. I cannot.
Oh, great. Well, this Marine trained all those sailors, and aboard the Kid in Baton Rouge, and I've seen it, and it's marvelous. It's a little heavy on CGI because we shot aboard the Kid, which is a museum ship now in Baton Rouge, and of course we couldn't take her to sea, so we had to make the sea come to her, and we do that with computer-generated imagery. But it's a terrific story about a very little publicized or very little understood crucial battle of World War II, which is the Battle of the North Atlantic.
Well,
Just
if
a couple of things.
If you're a producer or a studio out there, I can guarantee that all of our audience, all of our normal audience, and all of our
I got you guys.
would be up for the Forgotten War. Would be up for a good place to die.
Absolutely.
3 views right here, brother.
Write the
There you
checks,
go.
people. Write the checks.
Hey, Rip, amazing debut with none other than Mark Graney with Red Metal, which was my pick for 2019 best novel. And Larry, strangely enough, you were here. It received all kinds of accolades and comparisons to you and Tom Clancy with Red Storm Rising. And Rip, you've also got Salt by Fire coming out this November, your first solo novel. So can you give us a little bit about what we can expect? What sounds like really a hell of a start of a series.
Yeah, I'm excited. I want to yield like a couple seconds of my time by bragging on both the other two gentlemen for a second. So I grew up playing Harpoon. In fact, I was this close to becoming a Swabby, partly because of Larry's game Harpoon. So I not only am I looking forward to that, but he's got his Jerry Mitchell series that left off with Arctic Gambit in 2018. And Larry, when are we getting the next in that series? So I can't wait for that one to come out. But then to brag on, now let me switch over to our other compadre, to Dale. I got a chance to read Dale Dye's Shake Davis, the Delta File, an ARC copy. So getting the ARC and getting a chance to read it. And, Dale just kind of talked about why he writes. He writes for troops. He writes because he entertains. He writes because he was a troop and he knows what they want to read. And it's true. If you read his book, if you read the Shake Davis series, oh my gosh, the rest of us have a lot to learn from reading these guys. So I don't know. I'm in the shadow of the two gentlemen that just came before me. I'll talk about my writing briefly, but I don't know. Those two guys set the stage, so it's kind of nice to follow, to be honest. So yeah, we finished Red Metal. We got a contract for Red Metal 2. I've got my druthers in for what Red Metal 2 will be called. But if you read that book, then it shifts us kind of over to Asia from there. So you're going to go from Battle Europe, Battle North Africa into Battle Asia, and we'll tease out a little bit of Mark and I. COVID has slowed things down a little bit, but we've been commiserating, conspiring, discussing. Obviously, he's got his very successful series happening right now with the Gray Man, and he's in the middle of getting that thing ready. He actually wanted to join us today. He was desperate to be here, but he's contractually obligated through Penguin, and so he's kind of really pushing through to make sure that he's meeting the milestones he has to with those guys. But he said to say hi. He's a huge fan of the USO. We're hoping that me, hopefully Dale Dye, hopefully a couple others, Mark Graney included, are going to do a USO tour. COVID slowed that all down, but we're hoping, fingers crossed, next year we get a chance to get out and maybe visit Afghanistan, maybe visit Iraq, whatever they have for us, just to go sign some books and say hi to the guys that are, still doing the job downrange. Yeah, so the Assault by Fire series starts off. It's an invasion type deal, and it's funny because when we started to template this book, my editor at Kensington, Gary, was a big believer in me, and of course that's a wonderful thing. When your editor loves what you're doing, when he loves what you've written before, when he's supportive, you get more support. But Kensington was like, well, America gets invaded. America's vulnerable. I mean, we're not really that vulnerable, and there's never going to be a time when Russia is just pushing all our buttons and forcing us to dance to their music. And when is there ever going to be a time when there's internal civil strife and people are angry and so all of a sudden, about 6 months ago, which I have framed on my wall, the president of Kensington sent a very nice letter, and he's a wonderful guy. I met the guy. And it says, we're so glad to welcome you to the Kensington family. So the book is Russia sees the opportunity and seizes the opportunity. And so you have this confluence of America deploying overseas, and as we tend to do about every 20 years, a very big overseas adventure. And that, causes our active duty and a lot of our reserves to go overseas. And then Russia says, America is looking very vulnerable. Let's see what we can do. So I won't spoil it, but they come up with an exceedingly sneaky method to kind of kick us in the running lights. And the next thing you know, they're invading. And the main character is a Marine major who's fought in Afghanistan, Iraq. He lost his leg, so he's a wounded warrior. He's got a cast of characters, buddies that go from kind of the big mountain man who knows how to shoot his rifle because he's done nothing besides shoot squirrels and possums and whatnot, all the way to a very able female surgeon from the United States Navy and everybody in between, a Special Forces Army guy. And so the series is going to continue along that vein, which is you've got, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines kind of represented, defending the homestead at this point. So very patriotic book. The intent, obviously, kind of like the backdrop here, is, America takes a beating, in this case, right at home, and it has got to do something about it.
It's a great book. I'm just about 20 pages short of finishing it, Rip. It's a beauty.
Good.
Oh, Dale, you're awesome to say it. I appreciate that. Thanks, Dale. That means a lot.
Sounds great. I know we're all excited to read it. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, gentlemen, as we celebrate our 244th anniversary, I know it's going to be a little different with COVID, and we might be celebrating from our homes, but we want to thank Larry, Dale, and Rip for joining us. You're going to be able to find the links to purchase their novels and the links to, hopefully, we'll put a link up there to the game, Larry. And then we'll, most importantly, have a link to support the USO. We appreciate these gentlemen coming on. The USO is the perfect organization to celebrate on Independence Day because it takes care of our boys and women overseas, domestically. They need a taste of home wherever they are, and so we're going to bring it to them.
Amen.
Guys, raise a glass to all of you, and thanks for coming on the show.
Yep.
Happy
Thanks,
birthday,
guys.
America.
For having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Happy birthday, America.